Americas, and I want to look at it with regards to an historical lens on how Kenya has positioned itself in relationships with the United States, but how that has fundamentally changed under the Ruto regime. So the focus here is to think about how Kenya's diplomatic shift toward the Western Hemisphere, and with a specific focus to U.S., Haiti, and Colombia, but mostly with regard to the U.S. So the question that I want to ask is how does the Ruto regime solidify the core American ties, which is a non-NATO alliance, major non-NATO alliance partnership that Biden granted to the Ruto regime, the first of its kind in sub-Saharan Africa. How does the Kenyans do this while simultaneously balancing already existing ties with other countries, in mostly China? So what I found out in summary was that President Ruto's foreign policy is unique because it combines an attribute of charisma, evangelical connections, and Pan-Africanism in driving this ambitious and internationally engaged agenda that he then uses for his own political goals that might be aligned with Kenya or might be misaligned with Kenya. So to historicize it, usually Kenya has kind of been taking a lot more of a neutral position, a neutral posture, and a reluctant assertiveness in foreign policy despite its significant influence in the region. Well, I'm talking about East and Central Africa as well as Africa proper. So even though it has a slightly large economy and a very active civil society and literary class, it has often taken a much milder role in foreign policy as compared to other countries in the region. So its foreign policy, according to a lot of scholars that I saw here, is that it has a passive foreign policy that's often considered pro-West, but this policy is also elite-driven and consistent. Even though regimes have changed in Kenya about 5 times, the foreign policy of the country has not necessarily changed. So there's a core national foreign policy that we can discern from that. Going back to the Ruto era, we find that now it's kind of looking at a much more pragmatic, assertive, and transactional foreign policy, focused on the 3 areas, which is economic diplomacy, debt relief, and global visibility. So Ruto campaign on a bottom-up transformative agenda, which is a populist agenda to highlight the plight of struggling Kenyans. So he wants to export that internationally, but at the same time, he's also focused on building a network of alliances. His interest is not to lose the Western alliance, but rather to also expand it to non-traditional partners, including China, Qatar, and UAE, sometimes with unintended consequences in the process. If you think about it, you want to look at the political goals, so which is really the main one that I think about it. Ruto has faced a lot of domestic dissent because his promise, which was on the domesticity of the Kenyan society, which account for the majority of the population. But he hasn't governed that way. He has governed in a neoliberal fashion that cut a lot of state expenditure on the poor people, so there's been a backlash on his regime. So his angling, his closeness with increasing ties with the United States is more of a response to say that he has like a political clout at the international level, and maybe Kenya needs him to continue being relevant internationally. But you can also think about Ruto's goals with regards to Kenya's involvement in Haiti, which was the first of its kind for an African country involved in the Caribbean, which is a predominantly black country. But it was kind of under the auspices of the United States, which is sort of like doing the United States a favor so that the mission will not be seen as sort of like within a colonial lens. But that mission, the Trump administration was not very excited about it. He supported it initially, and eventually did not provide funding for it. So it has it's been disbanded as of September this year. So, but for political lens, it's very useful for William Ruto, because he says, well, now we are punching above our weight, and we are recognized, and we are the Pan-Africanist in the region, and nobody else has done this. We're the first one. In terms of materialist perspective, we think about the economic benefits which comes out of this foreign policy that Ruto is crafting for Kenya. So he really wants to highlight the debt restructuring as an issue of concern for many of the African countries. And the idea here is to reorganize conditionalities of the IMF and World Bank, and also give a lot more credit assessment that is geared toward the African condition rather than from Washington, D.C. and New York. And this is an area where he's getting a lot of traction. There's a lot of acceptance of this need for change of debt restructuring and debt conditionality, both in Latin America and Caribbean and Africa. So it could be a win. But with regards to trade, he's the historical ongoing pursuit of investment, foreign aid, and preferential trade access, especially through AGOA, which is Trump is not continuing because you can't have a tariff regime and a free trade regime as well. So AGOA is kind of like over. But Ruto was for extending of the AGOA to benefit the African and the Kenyan position. Last, you can think about it with regards to ideological inclination. Kenya is consistently ranked as a much better democratic space in the region, and probably the only one as of now. So Ruto was using that to get close to the Biden administration, and was successful in doing that and getting preferential visa regimes and additional investment in security and other areas. But his persona, the way he's governed, is not necessarily being democratic, so there's a question of that. There's also a question of performative Pan-Africanism, where it is useful for his agenda to project his voice, but not necessarily with regards to doing what is needed with regards to Pan-Africanism, which is to improve the quality of life and human rights of the African people. It's missing on that regard. So here we see a lot more of the utility of foreign policy and the relevance of the United States for Ruto's interest, rather than an extension of Kenya's foreign policy from the previous administrations. So I'm not going to get enough time to get into the case studies, but the one case study here which I want to highlight here is the partnership with a major non-NATO ally, which was given by Biden, and Trump was supportive of it initially, but the Senate, one of the senators in the United States, said that Kenya is getting too close with China. There's a need to reevaluate that major non-NATO ally membership, so they're going to do an investigation, and the next thing the Ruto regime did was send a whole host of battery of lawyers and foreign policy in Washington, D.C. to try to dissuade that investigation from going on, and to reaffirm Kenya's historical commitment to the United States in other areas, including terrorism, democratic anchorship, and also regional issues. So they have leverage because America is withdrawing from activities in Africa, and they need a regional partner. Kenya is willing to do that. But so I see a position in which there's going to be an uncomfortable maintenance of the status, even though the MAGA wing of the Republican Party might not be really interested in giving its material power to execute something major. So I'm going to end it here by saying that it kind of bolsters Ruto's, if this non-NATO allyship stays, then Ruto would have won with regards to his goals of using the U.S. relationship for his political agenda. So I'm going to end here. I have 2 more case studies, but I'm out of time. I'll get back to them on question and answers. Thank you.